Οραματίζουμε την πατρίδα μας να περνά τις συμπληγάδες με αισιοδοξία και ιστορική πίστη στην αποστολή του ελληνισμού. Οραματίζουμε έναν κόσμο δικαιότερο, ασφαλέστερο και ευημερούντα να απαντά στον κόσμο της βαρβαρότητας. Η ελπίδα μπορεί να γίνει πράξη.
Λαογέννητο κίνημα του Πασόκ προχωρεί. Μόνο με ισοτιμία και ψηλά το κεφάλι συναλλασσόμαστε με οποιαδήποτε χώρα, μεγάλη ή μικρή.
Εμπρός λοιπόν για νέες μάχες και νέες νίκες. Νέες μάχες και νέες νίκες για την Ελλάδα, για την ελπίδα, για τη δημοκρατία, για το λαό.
Thank you very much. Welcome, everyone. To honor the legacy of the late Greek Prime Minister Andreas Papandreou. Many remember Prime Minister Papandreou's premiership as a time where, as we've heard, social reforms were ushered into Greece. Allow me to highlight three of them: the establishment of the national health system, the enhancement of women's legal status, and Prime Minister Papandreou's role in the national reconciliation process following the Greek civil war. We know that in many ways, these reforms transformed the country. But 25 years later, they continue to touch upon issues that are still so relevant for our union today. In the last 2 years, national health systems have been needed more than ever. One of the lessons learned from the COVID pandemic is the importance of resilient public health systems with strong and solid infrastructures. And here, innovation and investment, both on a national and European level, are key. Let us also not forget that the pandemic had disproportionate impacts on women's lives. It exposed the real nature and true extent of the inequalities that women are facing on a daily basis. And as Prime Minister Papandreou knew well, it is our responsibility to tackle them. Dear guests and dear colleagues, under Prime Minister Papandreou's mandate, Greece took very important steps to mend one of its deepest scars, the civil war. And his contribution enabled refugees living in exile to return to their homeland, and as a result, the country was able to reconcile and move forward. As we said yesterday in the plenary, Greece is the birthplace of democracy. But democracy, as we learned, cannot ever be taken for granted. It must be nurtured. Our institutions must be safeguarded. And as Ukraine is defending its land, its people, and our common values from Putin's illegal invasion, this rings true more than ever before. And this is why we stand with Ukraine in everything we do, and whenever we can, we say it. This is a test for European democracy, one that we did not choose or expect, but one that we have no choice but to meet. And as Prime Minister Papandreou knew during times like this, remaining together is always the right decision. And it is on this note that it is truly fitting that this meeting room here in the House of European Democracy is named in his honor. Thank you.
Dear colleagues, dear friends, dear President Metsola, dear Nikos, it's a pleasure being here today with all of you to officially name after Andreas Papandreou this meeting room. This room paid tribute to the legacy of one of these political giants on the 20th century. Yes, one of those personalities that shaped the present and the future of their countries and the European Union. Andreas Papandreou was indeed one of the architects of the modern Greece, a man of state and a recognized professor of economics in some well-known universities in the world. But above all, he was a truly democrat who suffered political exile. After the Greek Civil War, he stood up against the military junta of colonels, and he was among the first one to be arrested. He lived in the exile, creating the resistance group that years later, with the return of the democracy to Greece, became basis of PASOK. And with PASOK, he paved the path for a more developed and socially just Greece as a prime minister. And what success! His first government motto change became the new reality of the country: strengthened democracy, legalization of civil marriage, the abolition of school attire, the introduction of social benefits, and the creation of the welfare state. Yes, all of this at the beginning of the 80s, together with the improvement of labor legislation and change in family law, such as the introduction of gender equality. And of course, he was the one who brought Greece in the EU. His commitment and his active role in the European and the international sphere made him known and respected among prominent political and academic figures. His dedication to Greece and to Europe, particularly in favor of the most vulnerable citizens, made Andreas loved and popular in his homeland. For us, his political social democrat family, he was, and still is, an inspiring politician and a model of leader to follow, with a strong capacity of negotiation, dialogue, and strong values. Now, his legacy and his memory will be even more present in this Parliament for those who work here and for those visiting. Thanks, Nico, and to the Greek delegation for this initiative, and to the Parliament, the President, and the Bureau for having it made possible. Thank you.
Dear President, allow me to continue in Greek. Φίλες και φίλοι, είναι ιδιαίτερη χαρά και τιμή μας η παρουσία σας και ιδιαίτερα όλων των συναδέλφων από όλες τις παρατάξεις της χώρας. Σήμερα, όπως ανέφεραν και οι προηγούμενες ομιλήτριες, τιμούν μια πολύ μεγάλη και σπουδαία πολιτική προσωπικότητα, τον Ανδρέα Παπανδρέου, που άφησε ανεξίτηλο αποτύπωμα στην ελληνική και ευρωπαϊκή πολιτική ιστορία, με τους αγώνες του για την ειρήνη, την κοινωνική δικαιοσύνη και την εθνική συμφιλίωση. Σφράγισε με την παρουσία του τα χρόνια της μεταπολίτευσης, την πιο μακρά περίοδο σταθερότητας και ευημερίας του ελληνικού λαού. δεν δίστασε να αφήσει πίσω του το παλιό πολιτικό κατεστημένο της εποχής του και να ιδρύσει το Πανελλήνιο Σοσιαλιστικό Κίνημα. Ένα κίνημα λαογέννητο και πατριωτικό, που ήθελε να εκφράσει τις αγωνίες ενός πληγωμένου λαού μετά την βάρβαρη και τραγική εισβολή του Αττήλα στην Κύπρο, διατηρώντας την ιστορική συνέχεια της δημοκρατικής παράταξης στην Ελλάδα από τον Χαρίλαο Τρικούπη και τον Ελευθέριο Βενιζέλο. Ο Ανδρέας Παπανδρέου, αν και έχουν περάσει 26 χρόνια από το θάνατό του, μιλά ακόμα στην καρδιά του ελληνικού λαού, καθώς έδωσε τη δυνατότητα στους μη προνομιούχους και σε όσους βρισκόταν στο περιθώριο του μετεμφυλιακού κράτους να έχουν ίσες ευκαιρίες για να οικοδομήσουν μια καλύτερη ζωή. Με την εξωτερική του πολιτική σφυριλάτησε την εθνική αξιοπρέπεια. Ίδρυσε το Εθνικό Σύστημα Υγείας και οι μεταρρυθμίσεις του στην παιδεία έγιναν εργαλεία μείωσης των ανισοτήτων και έδωσαν ελπίδα και προοπτική σε χιλιάδες Ελληνίδες και Έλληνες. Ψήφισε πρωτοπόρα νομοσχέδια την εποχή του, θεσμοθετώντας την ισότητα των φύλων και την αρχή της ίσης αμοιβής για ίση εργασία, το δικαίωμα στην άμβλωση. Αναγνώρισε την ηθική αντίσταση και έκλεισε τις πληγές του εμφυλίου πολέμου και της ξενοκίνητης χούντας, επιτρέποντας την επιστροφή των πολιτικών προσφύγων. Στο διεθνές πλαίσιο επανατοποθέτησε την Ελλάδα, σπάζοντας τους ασφικτικούς και καταστροφικούς περιορισμούς που είχαν επιβληθεί στη χώρα την ψυχροπολεμική περίοδο, κάνοντάς τη, μαζί και με άλλους ηγέτες της χώρας μας εκείνη την εποχή, ισότιμο μέλος της ευρωπαϊκής οικογένειας. Συμμετέχοντας ενεργά στην πρωτοβουλία των 6 μαζί με τον Όλαφ Πάλμε και την Ίντιρα Γκάντι, πάλεψε για τον πυρηνικό αφοπλισμό και την παγκόσμια ειρήνη. Σε ευρωπαϊκό επίπεδο, με τον αγώνα του για τη δημιουργία των μεσογειακών ολοκληρωμένων προγραμμάτων που κάλυψαν την Ελλάδα, την Νότιο Ιταλία, περιοχές της Νότιας Γαλλίας, έθεσε τις βάσεις για να εξελιχθεί η ευρωπαϊκή πολιτική της συνοχής. Διετέλεσε προεδρεύον του Συμβουλίου 3 φορές. Στην ομιλία του κατά τη διάρκεια της υπογραφής της Συνθήκης Προσχώρησης Αυστρίας, Φιλανδίας και Σουηδίας το 1994 στην Κέρκυρα, είχε αποτελέσει τα προτάγματα του σήμερα. Την ανάγκη για κοινή εξωτερική πολιτική και ασφάλεια, για ουσιαστική οικονομική ενοποίηση, καθώς μόνο έτσι μια ενωμένη Ευρώπη θα είχε ισχυρή παρουσία στη διεθνή σκηνή. Και πάλι θέλω να ευχαριστήσω από τα βάθη της καρδιάς μου όλους εσάς που ήσασταν εδώ σήμερα. Είναι μια ιστορική στιγμή από το κίνημά μας και είναι πραγματικά συγκινητική η παρουσία σας και των μελών του Ευρωπαϊκού Κοινοβουλίου και όσων ήρθατε από την πατρίδα μας. Και πάλι σας ευχαριστώ πάρα πολύ. Και συγγνώμη, ιδιαίτερη χαρά και τιμή μας είναι η παρουσία της αγαπημένης και ακριβής μας Σοφίας και του εγγονού του Ανδρέα Παπανδρέου, του Κωνσταντίνου Κατσανέβα. we're giving the floor to his son, Nikos Pαπandreou, because we have a technical problem.
Hello? Can you hear me? Sorry.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Ms. President, Ms. Perez, and of course Nikos Androulakis, thank you very much for making this effort. I'm sure my father would be happy to have his name somewhere in the European Parliament. After all, he was considered a staunch critic in the early times, in the late 70s, of European policy towards the Greek dictators. But in the end, let's not forget that with Mitterrand in the early 80s, they came up with the term social cohesion, which became part of the policy of trying to bring Greece, Portugal, and Spain closer to Europe through the EU funding and the Delors packages, as they were called in Greece. Briefly, like many people, he led 3 lives. The first was as an academic. He attended Harvard, but then broke off his studies to enter the American Navy during World War II. Then he continued to finish his PhD, and strangely enough, for a politician, a future politician, he was at the founding of the United Nations in 1945, and also attended the Bretton Woods in New Hampshire, where all the international institutions were created. So in many ways, Andreas Papandreou was present at the creation, as some people have said. And I think in the 1980s, he was the only European Prime Minister to have been in those 2 very famous international meetings. Of course, his first years were spent understanding the world, and he being quite trained as a neo-Marxist, as he called himself, I think he decided that it's not enough to understand the world, but it's also important to change it. And of course, after he made the decision to leave Berkeley, California, where the 2 of the children were born, including myself, a few years later he found himself in jail in Greece. So maybe he tried to change things a little bit too fast and too strong. And that's why when he came to power in the early 80s, he assumed the position of defense minister and believed that only a mass movement can protect democratic values. At the same time, he tried to forge an economic policy that would sort of resist the multinationals that were slowly taking over the world. That was very clear from the 1950s and on when he was an economic student. And his approach was to make the Greek economy stronger by supporting middle-level enterprises and trying to make them grow to compete. Of course, we see today that that is a dream that did not come true. He was also, besides a politician and an economist, a father with 4 children. Brother George was the former Prime Minister. My sister Sophia is in the hall. I'm Nicholas, and my younger brother Andy is an economist. So now we have a number of grandchildren. The youngest great-grandchild is on the island of Crete. So from all of us, children, not so young, but in Greece, for better or for worse, you're always a child of some great man. I'd like to thank you very much for today's honor, and I'm sure that he would be very happy to see that the European Parliament has grown teeth since he was Prime Minister in the 1980s, and that is now a place that with which he would agree about the resistance to one more superpower trying to take over another smaller country. And I think he'd be happy that Europe today is trying to make us all proud, give us dignity, and that the European Parliament works with a spirit of democracy and is informed by a truly vibrant civic political life. So Nikos and all the other European deputies in the room, thank you very much from Athens, Greece.
Οραματίζουμε την πατρίδα μας να περνά τις συμπληγάδες με αισιοδοξία και ιστορική πίστη στην αποστολή του ελληνισμού. Οραματίζουμε έναν κόσμο δικαιότερο, ασφαλέστερο και ευημερούντα να απαντά στον κόσμο της βαρβαρότητας. Η ελπίδα μπορεί να γίνει πράξη.
Το λαογέννητο κίνημα του Πασόκ προχωρεί. Με ισοτιμία και ψηλά το κεφάλι συναλλασσόμαστε με οποιαδήποτε χώρα, μεγάλη ή μικρή.
Εμπρός λοιπόν για νέες μάχες και νέες νίκες. Νέες μάχες και νέες νίκες για την Ελλάδα, για την ελπίδα, για τη δημοκρατία, για το λαό.